Welcome to the Synthesis of Yoga, the book that changed my life. We are going through the part 1 that came after Introduction. Introduction had 5 chapters giving the overview of the synthesis. Then Aurobindo started the part 1, the Yoga of Divine Works. Let us just take a broad scan of the chapters that we have covered in this part 1. The first chapter was giving the large picture of 4 aids: the knowledge, the effort, the teacher, and time, instrumentality of time. That is the broad framework. Then we moved on to the second chapter, self-consecration, which gave the most important starting point, the decisive turn of the soul to give oneself to the divine, consecrating, dedicating one's life for yoga. And yoga is not a part-time hobby, it is full-time immersion. And that decisive turn of the soul to give oneself is the starting point. So after that second chapter, Aurobindo took us to the underlying framework of Karma Yoga based on the Gita. Self-surrender in works, the way of the Gita, where establishing of the equality upon the foundation of that wide inner stillness, and surrendering of the ego, egoless, desireless action, and oneness, perceiving oneness, the divine presence everywhere, and to which you are offering all actions as a sacrifice. Then came the fourth chapter, taking up the sacrifice itself. It is not our individual act, it is a law of sacrifice, a cosmic law that is behind the evolutionary process moving all things. And the sacrifice is offered to the Lord of the sacrifice, who is presiding over. And Aurobindo also took us to fundamental realization of that higher state of consciousness. And on the way, the 3 different dualities, Brahman, Maya, Purusha, Prakriti, Ishvara, Shakti, corresponding to 3 different pathways of experience, the triune path. So with that broadly covered, now we have reached the 5th chapter, the Ascent of Sacrifice, part 1. That's what we are now into. So those who are new, you will find description below having a link to this chapter of the book, Synthesis of Yoga, part 1, chapter 5, paragraph number 1, and this is episode 67. Let's begin. This, then, is in its foundations the integral knowledge of the Supreme and Infinite, to whom we offer our sacrifice. And this, the nature of the sacrifice itself in its triple character: a sacrifice of works, a sacrifice of love and adoration, a sacrifice of knowledge. So now we are diving into sacrifice in detail. There are these 3 different movements that is constantly flowing through us. One is the sacrifice of works, all that we do, our activities. While this is happening, behind it there is our emotion, the sacrifice of love and adoration. Our emotional activities can be offered must be offered. Then third comes the sacrifice of knowledge, the activities of knowledge, the mind and its pursuit of knowledge. These three layers constitute the triple character of sacrifice. And this triple character comes together to give us the integral knowledge of the Supreme and Infinite. This had been Sri Aurobindo's consistent focus across the chapters, the integral knowledge, integral transformation, integral realization. Not only the static, but the dynamic. Not only the transcendent, but the manifest multiplicity, bringing them all together in that vast integral experience. Let me read this line once again. This then is its foundations, the integral knowledge of the Supreme and Infinite, to whom we offer our sacrifice. And this, the nature of the sacrifice itself in its triple character. A sacrifice of works, a sacrifice of love and adoration, a sacrifice of knowledge. For even when we speak of the sacrifice of works by itself, we do not mean the offering only of our outward acts, but of all that is active and dynamic in us. Our internal movements, no less than our external doings, are to be consecrated on one altar. So, we have our most outward nature, the body. Body is doing physical work. Behind this physical activity, work of the body moves our inner movements, psychological movements of emotions, of thoughts, sensations, everything. So in our sacrifice, we are looking at offering all this. It is not only the outer activity of the body, outer act, but all that is inner. And they are dynamic. They have an impact. It is a force in movement. So, even when we speak of the sacrifice of works by itself, we do not mean the offering only of our outward acts, but of all that is active and dynamic in us. Our internal movements, no less than our external doings, are to be consecrated on the one altar. Everything is offered to that one Supreme Divine. Sacrifice is offered to the Lord of the sacrifice. That is where the practice of consecration comes into picture. The inner heart of all work that is made into a sacrifice is a labor of self-discipline and self-perfection. Labor of self-discipline and self-perfection. That is the inner heart of all work that is made into a sacrifice. So it requires a great deal of inner discipline and moving towards self-perfection, by which we can hope to become conscious and luminous. Conscious and luminous. Light will grow in us. Our mind gets illumined, our heart gets illumined. Not only we become conscious, so by which we can hope to become conscious and luminous, with a light from above poured into all our movements of mind, heart, will, sense, life, and body. This light from above, light with capital L, that represents the Divine Mother, the Divine Shakti and her light pouring down in our material nature. Sun is there representing. Sun is also representing that greater supramental consciousness. So that is a material representation of a greater inner spiritual truth. So in yoga, as we progress on the path of consecration and sacrifice, doing all our activities as a sacrifice offered to the divine, consciousness grows in us, light grows in us, and we receive that light from above poured into all our movements of mind, heart, will, sense, life, and body. So it's an integral reception across the instrumental layers. And he will be coming back to this idea of pouring down from above the light. And it is a substantial concrete experience in yoga of this descent. The inner heart of all work that is made into a sacrifice is a labor of self-discipline and self-perfection, by which we can hope to become conscious and luminous, with a light from above poured into all our movements of mind, heart, will, sense, life, and body. An increasing light of divine consciousness will make us close in soul and one by identity. So that increasing light of the divine consciousness, this is what it will progressively create in us, certain deep closeness in soul and one by identity. We become one with that light and force of the divine pouring into the instrument. Make us close to our soul and one by identity in our inmost being and spiritual substance. Spiritual substance, Sat, our very essential being and its pure substance. Our inmost being and spiritual substance with the master of the world sacrifice. So that identification with the master, there is a Lord of the sacrifice to whom everything is offered, and in the process we receive the light, grow in intimacy, and move towards knowledge by identity, identification with the master. The supreme object of our existence proposed by the ancient Vedanta, which is Upanishads. The ancient Vedanta is the Upanishads, the primary Upanishads. The supreme object of existence proposed by the ancient Vedanta. There are many schools of Vedanta that came afterwards. The original Vedanta is of the Upanishads, where their objective was identification with the Brahman in the Upanishadic language. Here we are using the language, the Lord of the sacrifice, the Master. But also it will tend to make us one in our becoming by resemblance to the divine in our nature. The mystic sense of the symbol of sacrifice in the sealed speech of the seers of the Veda. Now he is bringing in the Vedic seers who preceded the Upanishadic seers. Vedic seers spoke of this, not only the reception into our nature, and we are becoming divine in our nature. One in our becoming by resemblance to the divine in our nature. Divinization. The Vedic seers were into divinizing all our becoming, all our instrumental layers. Not only an ascension, but also reception and a transformation. In that process, becoming in the manifestation. So it will tend to make us one in our becoming by resemblance to the divine in our nature. In our manifest nature, at an essential level, there is divine that emerges and transforms. So resemblance to the divine in our nature. The mystic sense of the symbol of sacrifice. So yajna, that image of yajna comes from the Vedas. But the notion of understanding of yajna was largely lost, and it became an external ritual of kindling the fire and offering oblations to the fire. But essential process is an inner psychological self-consecration and self-offering to the divine. Every act across the instrumental layers, outer, inner, everything. That offering, that is the oblation, that is the mystic symbol. The original Vedic symbol of the yajna is a mystic symbol. So the mystic sense of the symbol of sacrifice in the sealed speech, the Vedic knowledge is encoded. It is a sealed speech. We have to decode it. Now, that decoding cannot be done intellectually. It is only when we grow in experience, we experience the ascension, the descending movement, and movements of Agni, Indra, Mitra, Varuna, all that. That's when we are able to progressively decode the Vedic yoga, which they encoded in the imagery, in the mystic symbol of yajna. So the resemblance to the divine in our nature, the mystic sense of the symbol of sacrifice in the sealed speech of the seers of the Veda. Let me read this once again. So he is going back to the Upanishadic seers, the Vedic seers. That's where integral yoga's original source experience we can find. An increasing light of divine consciousness will make us close in soul and one by identity in our inmost being and spiritual substance with the master of the world sacrifice, the supreme object of existence proposed by the ancient Vedanta. But also it will tend to make us one in our becoming by resemblance to the divine in our nature, the mystic sense of the symbol of sacrifice in the sealed speech of the seers of the Veda. But if this is to be the character of the rapid evolution, because the yoga is to accelerate evolution. So if this is to be the character of the rapid evolution from a mental to a spiritual being, that's the transition we are making. We are currently mental beings. By a rapid evolution, we can become spiritual beings. So if this is to be character of rapid evolution from a mental being to a spiritual being contemplated by the integral yoga, a question arises full of many perplexities, but of great dynamic importance. So let's see, what is that question? How are we to deal with life and works as they are now, with the activities proper to our still unchanged human nature? So our human nature, whatever be its current state, we are starting from there. So how do we deal with life and works as they are? What should be our approach? We have a general guidance of offering everything as a sacrifice. Let's dive deeper into it. That's where Aurobindo will be taking us in this journey. How are we to deal with life and works as they are now, with the activities proper to our still unchanged human nature? Unchanged human nature has its own activities proper to its unchanged nature. It will not be even seeking the divine. It may even resist the divine. So, what do we do with our human nature as it is? An ascension towards a greater consciousness, an occupation of our mind, life, and body by its powers have been accepted as the outstanding object of yoga. So this is something that we have accepted, an ascension into higher consciousness and its reception into mind, life, and body. That has been accepted. But still, life here, not some other life elsewhere, is proposed as the immediate field of the action of the spirit. The spirit that we are receiving into our mold, it has to act in the life here, in this untransformed nature with its immediate field of action, our normal daily life activities into which the spirit is expected to come down. A transformation, not an annihilation of our instrumental being and nature. So our mind, life, and body, we are not looking at annihilation of the mind. Manonaša, many traditions will talk about it. Dissolution, whereas we are talking about transformation, not an annihilation, not a dissolution of our instrumental being and nature. So in that condition, what we do with the activities proper to the human body, human mind, human life energy, and its habitual activities are there. What do we do with that? What then becomes of the present activities of our being? Activities of the mind turn towards knowledge and expression of knowledge. So this is typical of mind. Mind is constantly searching for knowledge and express knowledge. That is the food it is seeking. The mind is not necessarily looking for the Lord of the sacrifice. It has no idea about it. Our normal mind is merely looking for knowledge and expression of knowledge. And we can see that it is studying the world that is around to understand what is happening around. Hardly the mind seeks the divine. So there is a activity proper to mind which is seeking knowledge and expression of knowledge. Activities of our emotional and sensational part. We have our heart and its emotions and sensational part, looking for its pleasures of sensation, heart seeking emotional affection, bonding, intimacy. That is activity proper to the human heart. It wants relationships, it wants affection, it wants to be loved, it loves the attachment, and it loves pleasant sensations. So these are the normal activities. Activities of outward contact, our outward contact. Previously, what we referred is the mind and heart. It's our inner movement. Then there is an outward contact. That leads to what? Creation, production, the will turn towards mastery over men, things, life, the world, the forces of nature. Our human will is on a march to conquer the forces of nature, conquer, control the world, control life, control things, and control over people. This is what more and more powerful you become. This is what generally people do. How to be more in control. So the outward contact has this tendency towards creation, production, the will turn towards mastery over men, things, life, the world, the forces of nature. So we have to deal with all these layers: mind seeking knowledge, heart seeking emotions, senses seeking sensations, pleasures, and outward contact engaged in creation, production, and mastery over things, people, forces of nature. How do we deal with this ordinary activities in the context of Karma Yoga? What then becomes of the present activities of our being? Activities of the mind turn towards knowledge and the expression of knowledge. Activities of our emotional and sensational part. Activities of our outward contact, creation, production, the will turn towards mastery over men, things, life, the world, the forces of nature. Are they to be abandoned and to be replaced with some other way of living in which a spiritualized consciousness can find its true expression and figure? That's a question. Are we to abandon these ordinary activities of our mind, heart, senses, and outward act? Or are they to be replaced by some other way of living in which a spiritualized consciousness can find its true expression and figure? So, what do we do? Abandon or replace them with a spiritualized consciousness? Are they to be maintained as they are in their outward appearance, but transformed by an inner spirit in act? That's another option. Keep the outward act as it is, but replace the inner spirit with which the act is done. So, are they to be maintained as they are in their outward appearance, but transformed by an inner spirit in act, or enlarged in scope and liberated into new forms? That's a third option. Enlarged in scope, liberated into new forms. So, any activity that we do can be enlarged, and two ways to enlarge: scale it up to larger and larger scale for a greater and greater impact. Is that what we have to do? Or liberated into new forms, because the old activity continuing the old mold of its expressions can be upgraded into new forms. And that's what we see. Our whole technological evolution is rapidly creating new forms of technologies so that we can enlarge the scope and create new ways of doing things. By a reversal of consciousness, such as was seen on earth when men took up the vital activities of the animal to mentalize and extend and transfigure them, by an infusion of reason, thinking will, refined emotion, or organized intelligence. So, now we are looking at when our rational intelligence emerged in the process of evolution. What it did was it took up our animal nature and enlarged its scope and created whole new forms that is specific to human nature. The creative force that we have taken up by the power of our creative intelligence, rational intelligence, we have created and extended the whole range of possibilities, expanded the scope of our action, created incredibly new range of forms that we see right now. Our whole world, man-made world, entirely new set of forms. That emerged because our mental consciousness emerged and it filled the animal nature with this new consciousness and created this new world of forms. So let's read this line once again. Are they to be maintained? Our regular activities, are they to be maintained as they are in their outward appearance, but transformed by an inner spirit in act, or enlarged in scope and liberated into new forms by a reversal of consciousness? Reversal of consciousness, our existing consciousness getting replaced by a new consciousness. That new consciousness creates new forms and larger scope. That is one possibility. Such as was seen on earth when man took up the vital activities of the animal. Vital activities of the animal. When we were pretty much like animals, the vital activities were taken up to mentalize and extend and transfigure them. We brought in the mental intelligence, rational intelligence, we mentalized the vital activities. So all our normal animal compulsions have been brought under rationalized mental ethical considerations, and using intelligence creating whole new social contracts, constructs, and of course all kinds of tool making, social organization, design, all that we did. Mentalize and extend and transfigure them, our whole vital impulsive nature, transfiguring them by the infusion of reason, thinking will, refined emotion, and organized intelligence. That's how we did it. Now, what do we do when we are looking at going beyond this mental intelligence to something higher? Or is there to be an abandonment in part, a preservation only of such of them as can bear a spiritual change, and for the rest, the creation of a new life expressive in its form no less than in its inspiration and motive force of the unity, wideness, peace, joy, and harmony of the liberated spirit? So there's another possibility. Abandon some in part, preservation of only such types of activities that are capable, who can bear a spiritual change. Any activity that cannot open to this possibility of spiritualization, reject them and go for only that activity that is open to spiritualization, the creation of a new life, expressive in its form, no less than in its inspiration and motive force. So not only the spiritual inspiration and motive force, but its unity, wideness, peace, joy, and harmony of the liberated spirit is to be brought out in this very molds of our activities, whatever be those activities that are capable of receiving it, so that the new consciousness become expressive and discard any activity that is not capable of that reception. So let's read that line once again. Or is there to be an abandonment in part, a preservation only of such of them as can bear a spiritual change, and for the rest, the creation of a new life expressive in its form, no less than in its inspiration and motive force of the unity, wideness, peace, joy, and harmony of the liberated spirit? It is this problem most of all that has exercised the minds of those who have tried to trace the paths that led from the human to the divine in the long journey of yoga. So, in the historic evolution of yoga, this particular problem has been addressed by all those who were trying to find a pathway towards the divine from our normal human state. And they have struggled with this issue of what do we do with our normal daily activities. Reject them entirely, or infuse them with a new spirit, or partly abandon, take up only those activities that are receptive and make them expressive. What is the way forward? Which one will give the best result? So this problem has been there throughout, and various schools have come up with all kinds of solutions what to do with our daily life activities. So it is this problem most of all that has exercised the minds of those who have tried to trace the paths that led from the human to the divine in the long journey of the yoga. Every kind of solution has been offered, from the entire abandonment of works and life, so far as that is physically possible. So there was this whole idea of renouncing all the mundane activities, our family, marriage, relationships, work, money, wealth, get rid of them as much as possible. Retain only what is absolutely essential. Every kind of solution has been offered, from the entire abandonment of works and life, so far as that is physically possible. Because there is a limit to how much we can abandon. There is a physical limitation because body has to be fed. It needs food. And that is where the drama begins. Udara nimittam bahukrita vesham. Because of this hunger, people get into all kinds of activities. You have to feed yourself. the absolute minimum. So how do you do that? So activities naturally come. How do you get your food? At least you have to go and beg. Minimum activities. To the acceptance of life as it is. So on one hand, complete abandonment. Other side, acceptance of life as it is. But with a new spirit animating and uplifting its movements. Not just accepting life as it is, but a new spirit uplifting and animating its movements. In appearance the same as they were, but changed in the spirit behind them, and therefore in their inner significance. So an act can look the same, but it can be animated by different states of consciousness. So here, clearly there is a possibility of you don't have to abandon the outward form of activity, but you can bring in a new attitude, new spirit, new consciousness into any action. So every kind of solution has been offered, from the entire abandonment of works and life, so far as that is physically possible, to the acceptance of life as it is, but with a new spirit animating and uplifting its movements, in appearance the same as they were, but changed in the spirit behind them, and therefore in their inner significance. The extreme solution insisted on by the world shunning ascetic, or the inward turned ecstatical and self oblivious mystic. These are the two types. World shunning ascetic. The ascetic turn that rejects the world as an illusion, as a trap, as Maya. That's one type. The other is inward turned ecstatical and self oblivious mystic. Those who are plunging inward into the ecstasy of union with that deeper inner consciousness, who become self oblivious of the world outside, who is a mystic who get absorbed into that inner union, inward turned ecstatical and self oblivious mystic, is evidently foreign to the purpose of integral yoga. So these two are not appropriate for integral yoga, because we are looking at an integral realization. We cannot abandon the world. So the extreme solution insisted on by the world shunning ascetic, or the inward turned ecstatical and self-oblivious mystic, is evidently foreign to the purpose of integral yoga. For if we are to realize the divine in the world, it cannot be done by leaving aside the world action and action itself altogether. So if realizing divine in this manifest world, if that is what we have set as our aim, which it is, abandoning action in the world action, or action itself altogether, no way. It cannot be kept aside. At a less high pitch, it was laid down by the religious mind in ancient times. Now he is coming to the religion, how religion approached this. At a less high pitch, religion did not go to the height which ascetic and mystics did. It is a less high pitch. It was laid down by the religious mind in ancient times that one should keep only such actions as are in their nature part of the seeking, service, or cult of the divine. So keep those actions that are in their nature part of the seeking. You are seeking the divine, so go to the church every Sunday, go to the temples regularly. That is all right. Or service, serving the poor in the name of God, or going and serving, doing seva in places, or the cult or the divine. And such others are such others as are attached to these, or in addition, those that are indispensable to the ordinary setting of life. So even if you take up these activities that are oriented towards the God, the divine, still there are other activities of life that are indispensable. We have to have food, shelter, housing, and all the regular activities of social life, and that demands our activity. And so keep these two as much as minimum form, but done in a religious spirit and according to the injunctions of the traditional religion and scripture. So we have all these 10 commandments and various moral and ethical codes that are given by religions to various societies according to their context, so that they can be contained. God's providence can be opened up with these moral, ethical rules and regulations brought in by religion. At least that was their hope. At a less high pitch, it was laid down by the religious mind in ancient times that one should keep only such actions as are in their nature part of the seeking, service, or cult of the divine, and such others as are attached to these, or in addition, those that are indispensable to the ordinary setting of life, but done in a religious spirit and accordance to the injunctions of traditional religion and scripture. Follow the scripture, follow the injunction, follow the ethical and moral codes that are laid down by the religious authorities. That was approach brought in by religions. But this is too formalist a rule for the fulfillment of the free spirit in works. So when we introduce formalized rules, it becomes too strict and limited. This is too formalist a rule for the fulfillment of the free spirit in works. Free spirit in works. And it is besides professedly no more than a provisional solution for tiding over the transition from life in the world to a life in the beyond, which still remains the sole ultimate purpose. So, religions propose a life in heaven. And it is keeping that as the aim. These concessions are given. And it is never really in this world. There is a heaven to which religion gives the possibility, according to the offers made by various religions. And only if you follow the specific code of conduct that is given to you by the religion. So this is too formalist a rule for the fulfillment of the free spirit in works, and it is besides professedly no more than a provisional solution. So this concession, the rule-based action, the ethical, moral guidance-based action, that too is only a provisional solution for tiding over the transition from life in the world to the life in the beyond. So you're doing it in order to go beyond this transition from life in the world to a life in the beyond, which still remains the sole ultimate purpose. An integral yoga must lean rather to the Catholic injunction of the Gita. So Gita is coming back. Here we are in the yoga of divine works. There's a Catholic injunction, a very, very universal injunction of the Gita, that even the liberated soul living in the truth is capital T here, someone who has liberated himself and established in a higher consciousness, truth consciousness, even such a person should still do all the works of life. So Gita is not proposing a provisional act in the world guided by any rules so that you can go beyond this world to heaven. Instead, it is said, even those who have accomplished a high level of consciousness, higher truth, they have to do all the works of life so that the plan of the universal evolution under a secret divine leading may not languish or suffer. This is something very profound, very central to the cosmic picture. There is a universal evolution, yoga of nature, process of evolution, progressively revealing the involved divinity in life, bringing out and expressing it in life. There is this plan of evolution. Evolution is moving from simple to more and more complex life forms, expressing more and more complex harmony, more and more complex oneness. And it is moving towards yet higher levels. There is a plan and there is a role even the liberated soul has to play in that large vision of the divine leading, a secret divine leading. Behind the nature's process, there is a secret divine leading. So that plan of unfolding of the evolutionary process is set in motion and we are to participate in it. If we don't, that is when that plan languish or suffer. That universal evolution will suffer if we don't involve in the process here in this material world. So an integral yoga must lean rather to the Catholic injunction of the Gita that even the liberated soul living in the truth should still do all the works of life, so that the plan of the universal evolution under a secret divine leading may not languish or suffer. So we have a work to do, that is evolutionary work. Integral yoga is an evolutionary yoga. Gita points to that. Though Gita doesn't elaborate on the evolutionary nature, in the context of Gita, it is of establishing dharma, replacing adharma. And Aurobindo speaks about dharma as actually that evolutionary movement in society. From old forms to new forms, there is a constant innovation, there is a progression, there is an impulsion of the divine leading this collective evolution. Dharma is that what is referred to as the Sanatana Dharma is that evolutionary force propelling individuals and societies to go beyond what is established to the new levels. In that process, there is breaking down of the old forms that are no more serving and establishing new forms. That is where the new dharma has to be established, new order has to be established. There comes the battle of life when you have to replace the old with new. So we are participating in that. That's why Gita is set in the battlefield. But if all works are to be done with the same forms and on the same lines as they are now done in the ignorance here is with a capital I, avidya in Sanskrit. Our normal evolution in material nature is seeped in ignorance, in avidya. If all works are to be done with the same forms and on the same lines as they are now done in the ignorance, our gain is only inward. And our life is in danger of becoming the dubious and ambiguous formula of an inner light doing the works of an outer twilight. The perfect spirit expressing itself in a mold of imperfection, foreign to its own divine nature. So here he is bringing in the two sides. Even if we bring in the greater, higher consciousness, the spirit, change the spirit, underlying spirit of a form of activity, That brings a paradox. Is it the raw? Is it what is expected that this perfect spirit, inner light, doing the works of an outer twilight? That means outer forms of the activity is still pretty much opaque, in the sense imperfect, full of discords. Having only the inner shift is insufficient. This outer form itself must evolve. But that evolution comes as a result of the spirit that is brought into the mold of current activity. As that spirit grows in strength, it will break the mold, transform the mold. Otherwise, it will be a dubious and ambiguous formula of an inner light doing the works of an outer twilight, the perfect spirit expressing itself in a mold of imperfection, foreign to its own divine nature. Spirit's nature is divine in its very essence. And here is a mold which is imperfect. And if this divine consciousness is to languish in this form, not able to express, and just continue that outer form, that will be a dubious and ambiguous formula. That is not what is proposed here. If all works are to be done with the same forms and on the same lines as they are now done in the ignorance, or gain is only inward, and our life is in danger of becoming the dubious and ambiguous formula of an inner light doing the works of an outer twilight, the perfect spirit expressing itself in a mold of imperfection, foreign to its own divine nature. And this happens to those who try to evolve and open to a higher consciousness, and you have received something of a higher nature, and you try to engage with the society and its mold, and you see that the spirit is not able to change that mold, and you end up serving things that are not really worth serving. So the spirit that you brought in end up serving things that are far too gross for its divine nature. That cannot be. We are not bringing in the spirit into the molds of action in order to suffer within that. We have to conquer these forms, transform these forms. If no better can be done for a time, and during a long period of transition, something like this does inevitably happen. Then, so it must remain till things are ready and the spirit within is powerful enough to impose its own forms on the life of the body and the world outside. But this can be accepted only as a transitional stage and not as our soul's ideal or ultimate goal of the passage. So the spirit has to gain the strength, and it has to become powerful enough to impose its own forms on the life of the body and the world outside. It is absolutely essential. Otherwise, it will be an imperfect result, a perfect spirit serving an imperfect mold, a highly capable individual serving an idiot. Not worth it, right? So, if no better can be done for a time, and during a long period of transition, something like this does inevitably happen. Then, so it must remain till things are ready and the spirit within is powerful enough to impose its own forms on the life of the body and the world outside. But this can be accepted only as a transitional stage, not as our soul's ideal or the ultimate goal of the passage. So, there is a transitional stage where we learn to receive the light. Doesn't mean it is able to immediately transform the molds into which it is received. It takes time to build up. It takes time to even access those ranges of power that is capable of transforming the molds into which it is poured, whether it is an individual mold or a collective life, to transform them into the rhythm and force of the divine consciousness that we bring in. As a transitional stage, yes, it happens. We bring in a new consciousness, but it is only an inner change, not yet an outer change. So this is integral yoga, looking at inner transformation as well as outer transformation. An integral realization all the way down to the material body, even divinization of the material nature of the body. So it's a full spectrum transformation we are looking at in Karma Yoga. So none of these half solutions are suitable for us. We need to look at what we will do in the next episode. So thank you for being with me in this journey. Please do subscribe to this channel. Also share your views, your observations. Thank you and see you next week.